Okay, I think we'll get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Heidi, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator of Politics and Prose. Thank you for joining us in partnership with Indies Unite, a group of independent bookstores across the country for a special event this afternoon with Dr. Janice Johnson Dias, Jessica Curry-Morton, Dr. Michael Genhart, and Mercedes Samudio. We are looking forward to hearing their insights into our topic, resilient kids, supportive adults, giving kids the tools to thrive. We will drop the book purchase link for the author's books into the chat. Click on the button from one of your preferred independent bookstores listed in the link to get your books. At the end of the presentation, we'll get to audience questions and answer as many as possible. You can ask a question by clicking on the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen and enter your question there. You can also upvote on a question that you like and want most answered. We do ask that everyone be respectful of one another in any question and comments. Before I pass the event over to our moderator, please allow me to introduce our guests. Dr. Janice Johnson Dias is a tenured associate professor of sociology at John Jay College in New York City. She's the co-founder and president of the public health and social action organization Grassroots Community Foundation and its Super Camp for Girls. She holds a PhD in sociology from Temple University. Her collaborative work on Black girls' mental, sexual, and physical health issues earned her a special congressional recognition and grants from the Robert Wood Johnson and Annie E. Casey Foundations. Born in Jamaica, Janice moved to the United States at age 12 and now lives in New Jersey with her husband, Scott, and daughter, Marley, who is also amazing. Jessica Curry-Morton is a best-selling author, writer, and work-at-home full-time mother to Parker, Ava, and Cash. Her blog, Happy Mama, Happy Babies, is a motherhood and lifestyle blog that chronicles their adventures. She and her family live in Washington, D.C. Dr. Michael Genhart has been a licensed clinical psychologist in private practice in San Francisco for 30 years. In his clinical work, he sees children, teens, adults, and couples, specializing in helping the LGBTQ+ community. He is the author of numerous picture books for children, focusing on topics such as bullying, compassion, uniqueness, friendship, and LGBTQ and multicultural families. He lives with his husband in Marin County, California, and they are the proud parents of a daughter who teaches marine science to K-5 students. And our moderator, Mercedes Samudio, is a parent coach, speaker, best-selling author, and founder of Diversity in Parenting, Inc., helping parents and children communicate with each other, manage emotional trauma, navigate social media and technology together, and develop healthy parent-child relationships. Mercedes started the hashtag End Parent Shaming movement, as well as coined the term shame-proof parenting, using both to bring awareness to ending parent shame. And we are so excited to have you all here with us today. And I am very glad to turn the event over to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So nice to see everyone, and thank you for those of you who are joining us. And I am just going to get started by saying hi to Miss Parker. Hi, Miss Parker. She doesn't know this, but I want to share that when I went to see the portrait of our former First Lady, Michelle Obama, I had the exact same reaction, Parker, where I just stood in awe, looking up at her and seeing myself reflected. So thank you so much for doing that and for showing us that it's okay to be in awe that way. Thank you, Parker. I love it. I love it. Did you love seeing that painting, Parker?
I love it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Talk a little bit more about that day that we went to the National Portrait Gallery. A little shy right now.
Hey, I understand. You've already done enough, Parker. I'll be honest with you. Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and kind of jump in, because I think this is a really important conversation. And so I want to start with the most obvious question, and I'll start with Dr. Janice, if you don't mind, but tell us, why do we need resilience? What is resilience?
So, I think we all need to be resilient. But before I get to that, I just want to say thank you for having me. I'm so delighted to be here. A little bit nervous, but still nonetheless quite excited. I think resiliency is really important because it allows us to recover really quickly from the challenges that we face. And if we can think of resiliency in the same way we think of like buoyancy, the ability to kind of stay adept and afloat and kind of move with the rhythm of things, then I think we're in a good place. So resiliency allows us to recover with minimum scars that are permanent, recognizing that things are going to be difficult in our lives, but they should not be in such a way the ones that we can manage in a way that just keeps us in inertia, it keeps us from moving forward. And so when we have that resilient muscle and when we develop it in our children, then they are able to adapt, they're able to have some buoyancy, and they're able to really hone into the things that bring them the most joy. And then they can really do some amazing things in the world.
I love it. I love that idea of buoyancy. Like, I love that space. And Dr. Genhart, the same question to you. What would you say is resilience?
So I agree with Janice. I think resiliency is really the ability to bounce back in the face of stress or difficult times. But beyond that, because that's sort of a common definition, bouncing back, I really think it's about being able to adapt and grow and become stronger so that we're ready for the next challenge and we feel prepared for those challenges, because guess what? Life is going to keep offering them up, right? I think it's also important that remember that resiliency is learned, right? It's not something that we're born with. And so our task as parents, adults in the kids' world, is to show them all the different things that make up resiliency so that they learn through modeling.
I love that. I love that idea of adding to that space of we have to adapt as well as things come to us. And that helps us with our resilience too. And that space of learning resilience, I think, is lost. We think, oh, you just are resilient, but you also have to kind of learn sometimes, what does that actually look like for me? And then lastly, let's hear your point of view about resilience. Jessica, what do you think resilience is?
I think that, resilience is all about, as Janice said, buoyancy, staying afloat, and if you actually think about a boy afloat, in the midst of a storm and things are hectic and chaotic and turbulent, but this boy just stays afloat. And when that storm is over, it's back to its original state, and, life is full of unexpected things that come up. And as adults, we know this very well, things are always changing. You're always facing an obstacle or trying to find a solution to a problem. And just like Michael said, we have to model for our children that, life happens, things happen, there's going to be challenges, but you can recover. You can come back from those things even better than you were originally. And I couldn't have said it any better than the two of them said it, but I felt I could add that little piece beyond the two great perspectives that they offered us.
Yeah.
If I could just add one other thing.
Sure, please.
I think sometimes we use the word resiliency and it can suggest that you're not affected by that thing.
Mm-hmm.
You just sort of, boom, bounce back. It doesn't mean that at all.
Right.
It means that you are affected by it,
Right.
but you're developing coping mechanisms to deal with that thing. So I think we have to make room to appreciate we do have a reaction to that thing, but then we, again, hopefully are using things that we've learned along the way to cope, to deal with that stressor.
This is where I think, Michael, you and I really agree here, because I think, especially as it relates to our communities, what ends up happening is that there's an expectation that you should bounce back really quickly,
Mm-hmm.
that there is like this window, like you get to grieve, you get to feel the pain for 30 seconds, and then you should be all the way. You should, in fact, just like flip right back over. And I don't see that. To me is not resiliency. That's often performative, right? That resiliency does require this piece of acknowledgement that this or these series of things have occurred, and this developing of new muscle skills, capacities to then be able to negotiate the next one, because it's rare that the exact same occurrence will happen. Something new, some new dimension of the challenge will happen, and then you need to have those muscles kind of ready to be able to tackle it. And that may not be so quick, right? It may take you time to develop those muscles. And I think too often, particularly caregivers, particularly people who are from vulnerable populations, are asked to kind of have an artificial bounce back really quickly from things that are deeply tragic and deeply challenging.
Absolutely.
Yes. For sure. And, you know, I think that kind of leads us into our next question, because I think each of you touched on this. But I want to ask, do you feel like building resilience is a step-by-step process, or do you feel like it's trial by fire, or a bit of both? Jessica, what would you say? Do you feel like it's step-by-step or trial by fire in building your resilience?
I think that it's a bit of both. I think that you absolutely have to model the behavior, as Janice said, model exercising that muscle so that when you face a challenge or obstacle again, you kind of already have a feel for how to tackle it and how to solve the issue or problem. And some lessons you can't plan to learn, you know, some of it's kind of on the job training or on the job learning, you know. So a bit of both, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. Diaz, what would you say? Oh, go for it. Yeah, go for it, Dr. Genhart.
Oh, I totally agree. I think it is a combination of both. I think the step-by-step process, if I were to kind of boil it down to what are those steps, I'm going to simplify here. They would include first being self-aware and knowing yourself and what are the things that stress you out. As Jessica said, you can't predict everything, but some things, you know, some of your, if you know your stress triggers, again, that's the version of knowing yourself, you're already ahead of the game. And then if you've learned some strategies to deal with those stressors, and we can get into this, some of the strategies include self-talk, you know, the way you talk to yourself, calming exercises, right? So that you're more present to deal with whatever the issue is, and then using those strategies in real life. Those are the steps. And the trial by fire part, I think, is a way of capturing the process of learning by experience, because that's sort of how life works. If you're paying attention along the way,
Yeah.
learn by experience.
I love that. I love that idea of being woke as a part of being resilient, because I think sometimes we forget that it's not just learning the steps. I mean, I think all of us could probably say this. We could read all day, but it's when you're faced with this challenge, as Dr. Genhart is saying, that now, okay, so you got the steps, but now here it is. How are you going to use them? How are you going to incorporate them? And Janice, what would you say? Is it step by step, trial by fire?
I think that I agree with Jessica and Michael in this matter, and I would only extend to the point that really, when we're talking about resiliency and even being self-aware, that's often like very adulty. And I find that many of us, the models of resiliency that we've seen are like models of martyrdom, models of suffering and surviving, not really thriving. And so we call those things resiliency, like, you know, my mama made it through, my daddy made it through, my auntie made it through, right? And they did make it through, but they're not thriving, right? And we know how to kind of suffer, and make it to the other side. So I think that there's a distinction between kind of survival and resiliency. And that's probably where the place that I really sit, which is if you survive with joy, and right, then I will probably call that resiliency. But if you survive in a way that really debilitates you, I probably wouldn't call that resiliency. And furthermore, I think I would add to the idea that if caregivers aren't really talking through their challenges with their children, I'm not sure that children will learn the adaptive skills for being buoyant, right? Is that kids will see their parents do a thing, make it through a thing, but I don't know how they would then themselves be able to use those things if there's no articulation or exchange happening. So that's
true.
the way that I think
100%.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's something that gets lost. It gets lost when we're working. And you said it, Dr. Diaz, you said, how do we go through it, right? And how do we understand what it taught us, right? And I love how you explained how we definitely talk about struggle as resilience, right? When we talk about it, we think my mom got through. I mean, I have plenty of stories of how we suffered and got through, right? But I really love this question. I kind of want to pose it is how do we move from resilience being linked with struggle to resilience actually being about thriving, to being about actually not just surviving, but really coming into a fullness? What would you say, Dr. Genhart? How do we move from that struggle mentality to that thriving mentality and resilience?
I think Janice sort of alluded to it. I think
Yeah.
as adults, primarily through modeling, right? How we live our lives, not just as survivors, but how are we living as thrivers? And however you define that, by showing our kids that it's not just about weathering a struggle, right? That's
Yes.
rather depressing, actually.
Yes.
It's about how we really grow from that. What have we learned from that? And then what do we then put back into the world, right? That's bigger than that, right?
Yeah.
That's thriving.
I love that. I love that. Jessica, what do you think? Moving from struggle to thrive, how do we do that?
You know, I think it's a lot about perspective. What one person may see as a struggle, another person may see as a chapter in their life that's truly just a building stone or a stepping stone to their greater purpose or something greater than what they're currently experiencing. And as Michael said, it's a lot about how self-talk. How do we talk to ourselves? How are we feeling in the experiences that we have or the experience of our own individual lives? And if you're living a life that is full of joy and you wake up and you choose happiness, and despite circumstances you may face, if your children see that despite the ups and downs of life, you're still joyful, you're still optimistic, you still spread positivity, that's all they'll know. You know what I mean? It'll provide them with a model to be positive and talk to themselves in a way that encourages them to push forward and do it in a joyous way, because we all experiences trials and tribulations and difficulties as a part of life.
Yeah, yeah. And this brings me, and I love how this conversation is just organically flowing to the elephant in the room. We just survived a very huge year. Some of us came out of it in a different space. And so I feel like, and some of you may agree, that 2020 really said, hey, resilience is a thing. If you didn't know it was, it is now. Why do you think that it takes something so big sometimes and catastrophic for us to really start to paying attention to our own levels of resilience? Jessica, you can start us off with that. Why do you think that something big has to happen for us to be like, okay, let's check in with ourselves?
I really just think that as a whole, we kind of pre-pandemic got into this mentality of, busy is good and being busy and making moves and I'm doing this and I'm doing that and, I'm exhausted from this thing and that thing. And, the pandemic really forced us to slow down and examine the things that either cause us suffering or encourage us to thrive. And hopefully many of us have made it a priority to obviously choose those things that, are better for us and encourage us to thrive. So when I think about the last year, I'm just like, wow, yeah, resilience is the perfect word, because, it really taught us to just put a microscope on our lives and said, hey, really look at things closer and do better for yourself and do better for those around you, especially our little people who we totally flipped their worlds upside down, in this last year. And if no one has taught me resilience, it's been my children. They've certainly encouraged me, because it's been hard to parent every day, all day.
That's why you send us to Auntie Amber's house.
Yes, that's why sometimes you go to Auntie Amber's house, as Parker's so pointedly stated.
I would agree with all that. I would agree with everything that Jessica said. I do think, though, that we pre-pandemic already knew that the importance of facing adversity and learning from it. So I don't think the pandemic was the first time that we sort of discovered that. However, of course, given that we've been in really multiple pandemics, right? Multiple. It's been kind of a bonding experience for all of us because we've all experienced, I think collectively, that the trauma associated with the pandemic. And so I think the bonding experience has highlighted resiliency during this pandemic. And hopefully, as Jessica was pointing out, we have used this as an opportunity, not easily, to figure out coping mechanisms, right? To move through this, to experience it, to move through it, and then to go beyond it. So I think it's been unifying. Again, unless you've been in a cave or on some remote island, we've all been affected by this, and that bonding experience has, I think, encouraged us to maybe learn from each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely, I think that there are a couple of things though that we should bear in mind is that those of us who are taking this call from our homes, that we are in a different context than other people, right? So people who experience heavy economic distress, they are having a different moment than the ones that we're having. I have the luxury of being in my home, the luxury of a teenager and a husband and a backyard, right? So and I can be introspective and I get to be safe. So I can really plan for thriving. I can start and put in place a set of things that really allows me to really reflect on my life, the skills that I want, how I see the long arc of my life, right? Because I think that there's something about resiliency where you're like, this is just a moment in my life. Mm-hmm. Right? And we can even look at the last 4 years, the last 12 years. Like these are moments because I know other moments and I can pull from that. That's the thing about resiliency that's sometimes challenging is that you have to have had some good moments to think about this challenging moment as temporary. Mm-hmm. But that's not the condition for everyone. Many people have bad, consistent, frequent, bad moments, right? Mm-hmm. And people who are in their house right now with children that they're ill-equipped to train, right? Who have different and important needs than those who may be neurologically normal or physically normal, all the rest of those things, we're in a different place than those folks. And so the moments, there going to be variations in how people respond and how they see it. And I just really want to honor that because I think sometimes we assume that we're all exactly in the same place. We're all experiencing a global pandemic, but there are within our different communities, there are people who are really experiencing egregious and overwhelming pain that does not seem temporary, that in fact feels like yet just a worse version of what is happening. And that I think is one of the things that those of us who are in this space have to be able to share with our children and our community to say, what is happening in your life at this moment is different from what may be happening in others. And I do think it can help us develop gratitude, which I think is also related to resiliency, right? A gratitude for what you have, recognizing that this is a temporary condition for you, but it's much more permanent or much more frequent in other people's lives. And I think that piece doesn't often come to the front. And I would be remiss to not bring that up.
Yeah, I love that. I love it too. I teach multicultural counseling, and we were discussing the other day some of what you were talking about in terms of the pandemic. And we had this discussion around this quote, and I forget who the author of the quote is, but the idea is that we all are in the same ocean, but we have different boats, right? And so we're all in this ocean of this global pandemic, the things that are coming up for us, but we're all in different boats. And I think it's important to talk about that. And that actually kind of brings me to this space of what we're talking about today, which is resiliency, and how each of you has authored books that kind of have a different perspective on how to build that resiliency and how to bring that into our world. And so I kind of want to start, just because Janice, you kind of brought us into it, but I kind of want to start with Michael's book about ouch moments, because you talk about a big concept in your book, right? You talk about this idea of words and microaggressions and how they hurt. And I think that has a huge piece in how we understand Resiliency. And so can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to tackle microaggressions in a kid's book? That was my first question.
Sure, sure. So let me just first by just saying a few words about what microaggressions are.
Yes.
Yeah, it's because they're very brief and often very subtle exchanges, insults, put downs, slights. They can be intentional or unintentional, but the receiving person feels it. That's the ouch part of ouch moments. And so I wanted to write about it because they exist, right? And they often point to more marginalized folks. And because they can be and often are invisible, I wanted to name them for kids so kids could identify them. So, for example, when kids use words like lame or gay, to suggest something that they don't like or they think is wrong, they are in this sort of sideways manner putting down, the disability community or the queer community without realizing it often. Again, it can be unintentional or intentional. And so I just wanted to put something together that kids would understand. I think we can use other examples for kids in kid language, like kids who might be naturally curious could ask, where is your family from? Or why are your eyes shaped like that? Or why is the color of your skin different from mine? Again, on the surface, these seem like, okay, curious kids asking questions, but they're often coded, kind of coded messages that can suggest disapproval or less thanness or you don't belong here. So I wanted to capture that in a book for kids and then what you can do about it. So that's the second part of the book.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I love that idea of what you just shared, that natural curiosity comes from somewhere, and we can really start to craft and help our kids move away from that othering type of language, right? And to really using that curiosity, but still moving away. Yeah, Janice, I saw that you unmuted.
I
Share,
mean,
please.
you should know, Michael, I write about, I have within a chapter dedicated to this conversation about microaggressions. And as a sociologist, right, microaggression is a top in our conversations. And I outline for folks when microaggressions are really macro structural problems, because so many microaggressive behaviors happen within school context. And they get pushed off where educators say to children, just be nice. And that just doesn't address the heart of the inequity. So here with my book, I really begin by saying that so-called natural curiosity should be attended to within the frameworks of children's homes, that caregivers need to become learners. We have this wonderful thing called Google. And for those folks who are engaging with it, a part of what happens when you're in the business of caregiving is to adapt a mindset that allows you to be informed, more informed than you were before. You don't need a PhD, but that we start to recognize that this space that we're raising our children in is not the space we were raised in. That's like the first kind of fundamental understanding that really caregivers need to adopt. All of us are older than our children, and our children are in a new space. And so it behooves us to kind of take the approach of like, since they're here, what can I learn? Can I share with them? And I think sharing that the world is made up of different kinds of people is really valuable before children enter spaces, right?
Yeah.
And that it's made up of different kind of people who have the same humanity as you and should be honored in the way that we honor you. That is often not articulated enough. I know many households for whom this is a primary charge, and I know many households where this is a secondary or tertiary charge. And I'm really asking caregivers to say, what can I equip my children with so that when they go out in the world, they see and engage with other human beings, regardless of their ability, their sexuality, their clothing, other human beings. And other human beings are not open for prodding, touching unnecessarily, for intrusive questions. For other human beings are worthy of kindness, right? And we can do that as caregivers. It's a gift we can give our children.
Yes, I love that. And I think,
and that will help reduce some of the things.
Yeah, and I think that that really kind of also brings us around to this idea of not just introducing our children to others and how other people's humanity needs to be respected and addressed and loved and cared for in the same way. But I think it also brings us into when we have more representation, it allows us to have a good foundation. And I think about Parker looks up and I think about this conversation. And so I want to ask you, Jessica, as you enter in this conversation, when you saw your daughter have this experience and you saw this kind of reaction to her experience, what made you think, okay, we got to talk about this, we got to write this book?
Well, the book came as an idea to me much later on. It wasn't, immediately after, taking her to see Michelle Obama's portrait that I thought, oh, I should make a book about this. When we went to the National Portrait Gallery that day, part of my parenting style is absolutely different than my parents, but I've relied heavily on the outside world to help me parent them. From the time that they were born, they've been to art galleries, they've been to museums, they've been to a variety of cultural and musical events. And for me as a parent, that's part of my self-care too. Doing these things and exposing them to culture and doing a variety of activities, not just going to the park, you know what I mean? So much later on, after I saw that she really had this special moment with that portrait, even though she was only 2, I think that exposing Parker to so much so early on really allowed her to be in touch with this world around her that she's experiencing, even as a 2-year-old. So we sat down after we went to the museum that day, and we talked about it. Obviously, I'm a Michelle Obama fan. So at 2, she already knew who Michelle Obama was. And as one of my role models, I shared that with Parker. This is a Black woman who came from not very much, but despite her circumstances, she really was resilient in becoming an amazing woman, an amazing role model, someone who was really set on making a difference in this world, especially for our children. And, Parker at the time was 2, and she was like, she's a queen. That's a queen, Mom. And I was like, absolutely. She is a queen in more ways than you know. And many months passed, and when Parker went viral, it was a viral moment. There was people who wanted good for us and wanted us to continue to inspire, and then obviously people who had other intentions. And the question that I got for many months after she went viral was, what do you want to get out of this? What do you want to do? What's next? Is she going to be a child model? Is she going to be an actress? But for me, it was like, no, we were living our very private lives. My goal at the time was to raise a child who was well-rounded, confident, strong, you know what I mean? Proud of where she comes from. And it wasn't to have a child model or to have an actress. And then I started to really think, well, what can we do? How can we take this special moment that obviously inspired Parker and inspire other people? And the book came because a light bulb went off one day. We love books. We read books. We have this massive, library of baby books. I was the crazy mom who was buying board books when I found out I was pregnant. Every time I went out, oh, a board book, I need it. So when she was born, the kid had books everywhere. And Parker will tell you today, if she was here, she's run off, but she'll tell you today, if she gets upset, if she's experiencing big feelings, she'll say, can I have a book? Can we go find a corner and we read? Because that's her safe place. That's something that makes her feel good, connecting with a book, you know, and just exploring this other world that this book is taking her to. But to get back, you know, I wanted kids, little kids everywhere, to see that this little girl, this little Black girl who has just as much opportunity as anyone else, saw this portrait of this amazing woman who overcame so much and now does so much. I wanted her to know that she can do it. And I wanted kids of any race, age, background, any circumstance to know that they can do it. You know, there's people of all races, people who've come from all circumstances, all walks of life, who have gone on to really be, you know, world changers and people who are really trying to make this world better. And I wanted Parker Looks Up to do that, to capture the magic of that moment, because Parker, to this day, if she sees Michelle Obama, she will squeal. If Michelle Obama is in the same room as her, she is overcome with joy and has to share, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, you did this, I can do it too.
I love it. I love it.
When we did finally get settled with writing the book and we had the opportunity to see Mrs. Obama again, the first thing Parker said to her was, you're an author and I'm an author now too. We both write books. You know, and I think that that's powerful. Kids need to know that no matter what's going on, they can do anything. The possibilities are endless. And I will continue to yell that from the mountaintops, and that will continue to be a leading message in any book that we write together. The possibilities are endless, just like our Vice President, Kamala Harris said.
I love that. I love that. And I know, Michael, you wanted to share, so
I just wanted to add,
ahead.
Jessica, thank you for sharing the story, the backstory. It's really lovely to hear. And I think part of the heart of your story, as I heard it anyway, is about representation in books.
Yeah.
How incredibly important that is in kids literature. And by maybe you've heard the phrase mirrors and windows.
Yeah.
Right, where kids can see themselves represented in books. That's the mirror idea. And the window is looking through something that maybe you haven't seen before, you know, being introduced to new people and new cultures. So we I think need more books in kids literature that represent. And Parker Looks Up is incredible for so many reasons. So many lovely reasons, including representation, for sure.
Thank you.
And you, Jessica, you know I love it because, you know, a reading child is just everything. It is just everything in terms of building capacity for your child, like reading literacy, just having the words, having the space, having the intimacy, having the joy associated with reading. It is, you know, reading has fundamentally altered our lives.
I agree.
I agree with you guys wholeheartedly.
I just love it because, you know, when you have your baby, you know, like you have this opportunity to see the world anew.
Yes.
And that though when people lean into that, when caregivers of all sorts just lean into this is new, this is like a new window into the world, then you end up going to museums and, you know, you want to try the new thing that you didn't do at the park, the new thing that they have, a new play. You can really use it as an exploratory time, and that can fill you and then give you this energy. And so I just love it. I mean, I could, you know, I remember those days all too well. So I'm just so excited to see Parker grow and to watch it.
Yeah,
I do too. I feel the same.
Parker's the oldest of three, so I am absolutely experiencing the world anew with each child I've had, and from going from being just a mommy of one to then a mommy of two to a mommy of three, and for the first time a boy mom. My last child is a boy,
Yeah.
so it's been obviously a joy to experience things with them, because as you said, you're experiencing the world anew completely through their eyes with them.
Correctly. Correct. Well, I love the discussion that we're having and jumping in, and I echo everyone in the panel when I say I love that she goes to books to read and escape and kind of sit with her emotions. And so let's go ahead and jump into some of our audience questions, because I know we have some questions. So Heidi, yeah, sure. Where are our questions? Where are we at?
Sure. Yeah, we're good. And if people want to ask more questions, you can just go to the Q&A button at the bottom and ask your question there. We'll be happy to take as many as we can. Thank you for this amazing conversation. This has been great, and let's keep it going. All right, let's see. Our first question comes from Ann Wilkinson. She says, she asks, how do we support our kids when we are running low? Parenting a kid who is not neurotypical and helping them thrive and become resilient can be exhausting. And I find myself running on fumes. So advice, if you have it.
Go ahead. No, because you have three, Jessica. Go right ahead. I have some ideas.
I will tell you, with Parker, who was my first, I gave her my all. She was my, my first priority. I put her before everything, even myself. Ava came along. I was still pushing forward, giving them my all, putting them first, making sure that their needs were always met first. And when I got to baby 3, no. You can't parent them effectively if you're running on fumes. Even for parents of children with special needs, you can't parent them if you're running on fumes. You have to put yourself first. If you're whole, if you're well, if you have it all together, as best as we can as parents, we're never always going to have it all together. But if you're good and you've been taking care of yourself to the best of your abilities, you're going to give them your best as well. You can't parent on fumes. I mean, I tried and I learned the hard way, because it'll just end up in you crashing or, having bigger feelings with your kids than you should. And it's not their fault. We have to put ourselves first. We put ourselves first, and then we can be our best for them.
Hey, Jessica, can you maybe say a few words about how do you put yourself first? Like what do you focus on there?
So for me, it's the little things, making sure I have a shower every day, making sure that I eat breakfast and I eat my meals every day. They always get fed, 3, 5, 6 times a day, but making sure that I don't skip a meal. It might mean that I need to slow down and say, you know what, today was a long day. I'm going to reward myself. I'm going to go have a glass of wine. You know what I mean? It's really being intentional about, you know what, I'm running low. I need to go step away. I ask my husband to take the reins for a little bit. I need to step away. I need to go do something for me so that I can come back and be better for them. Like I said, for me, it's the simple things, making sure that I'm eating, making sure that regardless of what's going on, I'm taking a shower every day or whatever, but it's the little things for me that really make a difference. And during the pandemic, obviously you can't go get a massage or necessarily go out, but it might mean I'm going to go take a walk by myself. It might mean that I'm going to go on a drive by myself. It's the little things for me that add up to me feeling like I'm charged up and I can really do what they need and be there for them emotionally. When I'm not well emotionally, I can't be supportive for them. So,
yeah, and
Go ahead.
I add a couple of things, because when I had my first child, we made $40,000. And so I had to work. My husband had to work. Like we just didn't have the money, right? And that actually really creates additional stressors, right? And so many, we know that most households are mother-only households with children. And so those of us who have the luxury of different constructions, that's fine. But what it did was it forced me to build a community. Jessica, I think I heard you say it's like, I expect the world helps me out. Like the world helps me out. And so I had to learn to utilize my fullest community in order to raise our child, because I needed to make money, I needed to care for her, and I was displaced. And we then had to move. All of those things were happening. And so I felt really extended. And so much of what I talk about in the book has to do with this idea, which is what happens when resources are low. What do you have to do that's going to allow you to attend to you? And I think that one of the first things is that you have to start doing an accounting of the resources that you have. And if you are missing resources like somebody to watch your child, especially if you have a child that's not neurologically typical, right? Like you need other bodies to help you. It will be difficult to do this without other human bodies to watch your child. I really encourage all caregivers, those who are low and medium or high, to do whatever they can to start their day by themselves. Always, if it is possible that you can get 10 minutes at the top of the day without other human beings, you win. You will feel significantly better. And if you can increase that number from 10 minutes up, you will feel even better, because bathing, clothing, all the rest of those things, but you also have this other thing, which is your spirit. You have a set of desires and passions that are your own. And in the book, I really outlined for people that when we are attending to our passions, the things that drive us, that energizes us, but we do have to make sure that the practical conditions are really there. So economic constraint, housing challenges, the absence of childcare, those are real tangible constraints that you have to then manage. And then you can attend to these kind of deeper, more ethereal matters.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
I agree with everything that you both have said, and they really focus on self-care. But I think self-care is kind of an easy term to kind of toss out there, and you have to get sort of practical about, what exactly does that mean? And I think it does involve a shower and eating and sleep. But I think it also involves things like self-compassion, right? Being able to say, this is really hard. It is hard. And I'm doing the best I can, right? Under challenging circumstances. I think it also involves, I love that, Parker has a sanctuary within your home, that moms and dads need sanctuaries too, right? A quiet place, that's just theirs to kind of regroup. And then finally, I think Janice was commenting on the importance, or both ladies commenting on the importance of a support system. Like we cannot do this alone. So really, part of self-care is, who is in my support system, right? Who has my back?
Yeah.
Sure. We probably only have time for one more question, so I'm going to put this out there. This is from Katie. We were reflecting on what we should be doing as parents, but Katie's question is, what tools are you giving your kids during COVID to help them thrive, especially the young ones? And she says, hello to Parker.
COVID, you said hi, Katie.
COVID is hard for my child because my child is used to being able to be mobile, being able to travel, right? Traveling is a huge part of the way that we have lived for 16 years. And now we are US bound. Jersey bound, this address bound, right? All of those things. So we have leaned into what I encourage people to do. We have leaned into attending to our physical health. That is the kind of first erosion, because not moving is what many people did. We just stay inside, because we, like my good friend Dr. Goodman says, like the COVID streets, we were going to avoid COVID streets. So the sedentary behavior is just not fundamentally not good for us. So we had to figure out how we were going to tend to our physical health. And that really does help with our mental health. We have found new things that we love, right? New ways of our own individual loves, but also trying to figure out ways of connecting together. But really what I have asked her to do, which is what I'm asking anybody who will listen to me to do, is to find out what are your things that you absolutely love to do. And also simultaneously, what are the frustrations that you have in your community, and try to marry them. The very act of giving to others and doing something to make the world a better place has been the thing. So my child loves books, as Parker knows. So one of the things, she could not travel to do her kind of service work, was reading to kids on her internet, right, on her social media, on YouTube. And that turned into a whole Netflix show, right? Bookmarks.
Yes, love bookmarks.
So, right? So, but it wasn't for bookmarks. It was when you're in the act of attending to your passions and seeking to connect with others, that is one of the things that I would encourage caregivers to do with their children. If they're not, we have this big world problem, right? Pandemic, but we have all these other big issues that are showing up, right? We're really now recognizing that racism is real, right? Homophobia is really institutionalized. Transphobia is here. Environmental and climate changes are here. What can children do kind of in their worlds, plug away? Because just attending to yourself all the time is not healthy, right? And it is in sharing your gifts, sharing who you are with the world, helping and contributing that I've been doing that with my child, with my husband, with my friends. What are we doing to make the world better? Because now, really, we're inside our homes, right? And there are things that we can do. So I encourage caregivers to talk to their children tonight, ask them what they're passionate about, what they're frustrated about, and try to see if they can marry them in order to do something. And I bet you children then can devote a new and different kind of energy.
Thank you. I agree with that. Michael, let's go with you as we're kind of wrapping up.
Yeah, I agree with all of that as well. I would also think about it. This is sort of painting in broader strokes, in terms of what are the things that we would hope to build up in our kids in general to develop better skills around resiliency. And I think Ken Ginsberg, in his book about that subject, has written about the 7 C's. And the 7 C's are competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control. I won't go into all of them, but I think these are things that we can help develop in our kids in general, right? Because they apply to all kinds of adversity, right? And what a wonderful gift to give our kids this life skill, right? And you do it by breaking it down in these following these different 7 C's. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I love that notion too, because like you said, it's just, you break it down, right, into these smaller concepts. Jessica, how would you answer that?
Well, so of those C's, I heard coping, right? And did you say communication?
No, but you can add that. That's 8 C's.
Yes, 8 C's. When I heard the question, I really thought about, okay, so what tools have I given my little ones during this unprecedented time? And the first tool that came to mind is their ability to communicate. I think that I've been really intentional in making sure that they're very emotionally intelligent, because when I was a child, I struggled a lot to share my feelings and communicate what I was struggling with, or how I felt about particular situations, especially with the two people who were the two people I should have trusted, my parents. I struggled a lot. So as they've grown up, I've equipped them with this tool of communication, and we've really worked on it now during the pandemic. You know, when something arises, when there's a squabble or argument, as little kids do often, or if there was a misunderstanding on my part, I really am intentional about being super present, stopping whatever I'm doing, sitting down and talking to them and looking them in their eyes and telling them that I understand whatever feeling it is that they're communicating, and really trying to make their ability to communicate with me something that they just do because they know mom is a safe place. Mom is someone who cares about me, so I can fully and wholly tell her how I'm feeling. And then the other tool that I've equipped them with is coping mechanisms. I'm a parent, a child of divorced parents. So throughout my childhood, I went to therapy. And in therapy, one of the very first things that I learned in dealing with my emotions was coping techniques. So we, in addition to really honing in on our ability to communicate well, in that communication, we've really worked on how do I deal with these feelings that I have about the situation? You know, I've shared my feelings with mom. She's acknowledged them. She respects them. I feel better because someone feels me. Now, how do I deal with those feelings? And as I said earlier, one of Parker's coping mechanisms is her books. If she's feeling big feelings, if she's had a major tantrum and she's still kind of upset after, and those big feelings are lingering, if you ask her, Parker, what do you want to do? She'll tell you, you know what, I want to go read a book. That'll make me feel better. So that's one of her coping mechanisms. So for me, the communication and really teaching them how to cope with their feelings have been instrumental in taking some of the edge off this, pandemic time.
Yeah. And I'll just add, as we kind of get towards the end, I do not have children, but I do parent work. And what I always remind my parents is this: you're still human too. You don't have to have it together. And I would even say part of helping our kids build tools is to show them that too, to say, I actually don't know. And so let's figure it out together. And I think that sometimes helps too, because I'm sure many of us grew up with parents who always had it together, or at least always tried to have that facade. And that can be hard because then you feel like you've always got to have it together. And so I think another tool that we often forget to teach our children is it's okay to be human too. You don't actually always have to have it. You can be frustrated, and you cannot know how to say that you're frustrated in the nicest way, because we don't always say we're frustrated in the nicest ways. And so I echo everybody's sentiment, and I often will tell my parents the same thing. You still get to be human while you're raising a human. You don't have to stop being human to raise a healthy human. Actually, in your humanness is where they'll see how to be healthy, because they're seeing that it's okay to be on every kind of side of this spectrum. I don't always have to be right, and I don't always have to be wrong. I can kind of vacillate between figuring out which is which. And so that's kind of my last spiel there on that space. I'll turn it over to you as we wrap up.
Yes, and we're all worthy of kindness. I love that.
Yes.
I put that down too. That was wonderful. Thank you all so much. Jessica, Michael, Janice, Mercedes, thank you all so much for being here. On behalf of Indies United, we are just so pleased that you all could come here and share what we should be doing as humans, but also things that we should be sharing with our little humans. So thank you so much. Just a quick reminder that we did put another link in the chat so you can buy all of these wonderful books. And as we have learned, Parker, let's use our books as coping mechanisms as much as we can. Thank you for that wonderful piece of advice, Parker. Thank you so much. We can see everyone's books here. Thank you so much. We are also pleased that you were here. Please keep reading widely and take care of yourselves out there and the little people in your lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.